Hi, I'm Anya, also known as Meppity, and today I'll be talking through my process for my 3 main art styles. So, for those of you who don't know, I love to draw in a huge variety of ways, although I do have my 3 main comfort zones, and I'm going to be demonstrating them with my character Angela. She's like some demon person, I don't know, I haven't really figured her out yet. To start off, before I get into any particular style, I always do a sketch. My sketches tend to be very loose and mostly gestural, just to get a sense of the pose and proportions. Although I do also at this stage focus on the face, because that's where the human eye is naturally drawn, and you do want to get that right because that's where most of the expressions come from and most of the personality. In this video you can see that I did several versions of the face, and that's just because I'm playing with the 3 different styles in this same sketch. That's not what I normally do, but hey ho. And then, once I have finished with the first sketch, I do a very quick colour pass, super rough, just to see if it looks right, and then I go in with a secondary sketch. Sometimes I skip this stage depending on what I'm drawing or how good the first sketch was, but here you can see I add a little bit more detail in places like the shoes, I add the fingers, and focus on where the eyes are going. Once I'm comfortable with that, I get into the line art. So now we're on to my first style, and this is, I guess, my more clean, simple style. I do draw the flow of the hair, and I don't add too many details. If I was going to animate, I would lean more towards this, although even then, I would simplify things down a bit more. With this style, I also do draw the eyes, and I like them to be reasonably expressive. I love big, long bottom lashes and eyeliner and stuff like that. For this line art, I'm using the dry ink brush from Procreate. I'm not sure if I made it or if it is one of the default brushes, but either way, it is my favorite. I use it in all my styles, at least somewhere. And I think it's mostly because of that slight grit and texture that it provides, whilst still being very clean. Once I'm done with the line art, I go in and block color the whole piece. I do this one of 2 ways, and in this version, I use the select tool. In the second style, I use the other version, but I'll talk about that then. But yeah, here I use a select tool going all the way around all the different parts in a separate layer, and sometimes I do separate the layers by color. That's what I've done here, and that's just to make the shading easier later. With all my styles, with everything I draw, I am naturally drawn towards warm colours, but hey ho, that's the way it is. And this is also the stage where I add a little bit of detail. For example, as you can see on the joints and the cheeks and ears, I add a little bit of rosiness just to give some life. Once I'm done with that, I create a multiply layer and select a colour which is kind of like a light pinkish grey, and I go in with the darkest parts of the drawing. So this isn't exactly shading, but just helps to give a little bit of depth. I'm using the Nico Roll brush, that is one of my go-tos, and for the harsher lines I go back in with the dry ink brush. This is also an opportunity to add a little bit more detail, as you can see with the horns, but I tend to keep that to a minimum in this style. After this round of shading, I go in with one more multiply layer, the same colour, but I'm much rougher and it's much blockier, and it's to actually add lighting to the piece. I'm going back in with a Nico Roll brush, and my lines are mostly harsh, although I do use an eraser in some places, just to soften some parts of shading. Once I'm done with that, I add an overlay layer. This can be overlay, hard light, soft light, depending on how I'm feeling, and I lower the opacity of it, and with this I add some noise, and that way it adds a bit more texture to the piece. And that is how that looks all together. Yeah, so that's my first style. Moving on to my second style, I think this is the one I'm most known for. It's lineless, and it has that classic tumbler nose and beady eyes, but this is one of my personal favorites, although occasionally it's much harder to add like expressiveness to the face because all the features are so simple, but it does have its place for sure. So with this one, you can see I'm using the line art from the previous style. Usually I don't do that. I usually rely on just that earlier sketch phase. It's because I don't need any lines, so I can work out the things specifically later. And to fill all the big shapes, you can see I am drawing this time, and I use the monoline brush, which is, I believe, in the calligraphy section of Procreate. It's again a favorite because it's very clean, has the smoothing on it, but it does allow for rounder edges and provides me more control than the select tool. I'm using the same colors as before because no matter what style, I do tend to have that same warm feel. And then once I'm done with the flat color, I will add some detail. So in this layer, I'm using the dry ink brush again, and this is mostly to differentiate parts of the body that are the same color that are crossing over. For example, you can see the arm and the rest of the jacket, because without the line, you wouldn't be able to differentiate where is where. I also use the opportunity to add a little bit of fun to the hair because I draw less flowiness in this style, and so I just let it look a little messier. Then here I also create a new layer, which is either add or multiply depending on how I'm feeling, and I go in with a really large quick pass of the Nico roll brush. This just adds a bit more texture. You can see a recurring theme with my love of texture. Then I go in with a multiply layer, do a very similar thing to what I did in the previous style, and I am just a little more loose with it. What I love about the Nico roll brush is that I do have a lot of control, but rather than round shapes, because the shape of it is rectangular, it just feels a bit more angular and is more stylistic in that respect. Depending on the drawing, I might do more or less detailed shading. Here I did go pretty detailed with the horns, for example. That's not something I always do. Once again, I'll go in with a second pass of the multiply layer, and this is just to add a bit more extra depth. This time I did it the other way around to the previous style. And then, once I'm done with that, I make an add layer. With the add layer, I pick usually a deep red or orange, and I lower the opacity, give a quick pass with the Nico roll brush over some of the body just to add a bit of glowiness to it. Then I most of the time create a second add layer with that same color, but this time I make harsher lighting to create that rim lit effect. And there you have it, that is my second style, and possibly one of my favorites. Moving on to my third and final style. So I call this one the ugly style because my characters always look gaunt and a little withered in this one. I really like drawing the fingers in this style as well. They're always old lady hands, but that's really fun to draw for me. Here I also like to use very square, angular line work. And I'm still using the same dry ink brush, but this time I'm varying the pressure much more so that the line weight is also varied. And no matter what I'm drawing, if it's straight hair, curly hair, soft fluffy things, smooth things, there's always that squareness to it, and I think it's really fun, but this sort of thing isn't really sustainable, so it tends to be only for illustration. As you can see, I'm adding a lot more strands of hair than I did in the previous styles, and I'm adding a lot more texture to the coat. Then I also draw all these lines on the trousers, including wrinkles and just general texture. Here is where I love adding wrinkles. Wrinkles are one of my favorite things to add, whether that be on the skin or clothing. Sometimes I add more than necessary, but that kind of adds to the vibe, you know? Then the footage kind of gets all over the place, and for some reason it missed out on the block colouring, but it's the same as before. And here I'm going in with that first pass of the multiply layer, but rather than using the Nico roll brush this time, I am much more select with where I'm placing the shadows, and so I'm using the dry ink brush again. And when I'm trying to fade out the edges, rather than actually having a fade, I use lines. I'm not really sure how to explain it, but I'm sure you can see, and depending on what texture I'm trying to emulate, sometimes those lines are longer, sometimes they're shorter, and it's kind of reflective of the line art style, if that makes sense. Once again, I'll go in with that second pass of the multiply layer, same thing as before, except this time I'm just much more liberal with the actual shaded areas. But I'm still doing that same edge technique type thing that's happening. Whilst I'm here, I guess I can talk a little bit more about Angela. She's a demon. She is a teenager. She finds the world problematic, but she doesn't really bother to do anything about it. She just wants to party. That's her goal in life, but she has a job and she has to do it. That job, I'm not sure what it is yet, but when people make her do it, boy, does she get pissed. Going back into the lighting, so I'm now creating an add layer and doing the same technique as I did with the multiply layers. One thing I forgot to mention with this style is that the line art, I usually make it a dark brown or red rather than a traditional black. I just think it makes it a little bit brighter and it's more unusual, I guess you could say. And there you have it. That is my third and final style, the ugly style. I hope you like it. I do love drawing in this one. I don't think it's generally as popular, but it's very fun. So there you have it. There's all three of my styles. I hope you found it useful for me to go through my process with them all. If you have more specific questions, do let me know in the comments down below. I may have missed something. But yeah, they're so fun to do, and I hope you like the character too. I'd like to try some more with her. In fact, because you've gotten all the way through this video, here is a little bonus content. Okay, there you go. That's the whole video. I hope you enjoyed. Hope you found it useful. And whilst you're still here, why not leave a like, a comment, and subscribe? I make all kinds of art-related videos, generally once every 2 weeks. And also, why not follow my Instagrams at anya.arts and Meppity. Anya.arts is more for polished, finished things, whilst Meppity is more goofing around, sketches, classwork, and so forth. Why not also become a patron? For $4 a month, you get early access to my videos, exclusive content that isn't posted anywhere else, and you also get unlimited one-on-one audio critiques of your work from me. So if you're applying to university, for example, and you have a portfolio, I'll very happily check it out and give you my advice, even though I'm not a professional, but people seem to like it. So yeah, that's all. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you soon. Bye!